All right, class. Today we're going to discuss a little bit about uh, some more loops here. Now, we've gone over while loops, for loops, do while loops so far. So we'll talk about a little bit more about controlling those loops, how many times they go, what controls that in this little video. Now, first and foremost, we're going to be using user input for this. So, I've got my import java util.scanner, and I've got it set up here in the main. And I just call this input loops. So you want to go ahead and make a project, go right ahead. I usually put the date at the top. Most of that is just my personal preference. Typically, I've probably explained this to most people already. It just keeps things in order for me for when I'm practicing. Now, the very first question here is, how many times would you like to loop? I type that in, and then it goes ahead and saves it in this variable called num. Now, at first here I have a for loop. And this for loop goes from 0. Now, if I set this to 5, let's say, this would run 5 times. Now, since I set it to num, it's going to run however many times I typed in here. So if I type in 5, it's going to go in there, and this will be 5. It'll start at 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, and when I hits 5, it's going to stop. So the way a basic for loop works is it starts at this point here. It ends when this condition is met, and this is how many it goes up each time. Now, plus plus is just 1. So it's going to go up by 1 every time. So in this case, if I type in 10, this will go 0 to 9. It's going to start at 0 because that's where I set to start it. If I wanted to start it at 1, I just change that number. Now, I'm not printing anything with it. It's just going to print barbecue chicken. But if I wanted to add a variable to the end or something, I could simply just plus I, and you'll see that it's going to print 0, 1, 2, 3, and, however long it takes. The reason loops are so powerful is because I literally can just type in a different number and this will run a different number of times. I type in 1,000,000, guess what? I don't have to change anything. This entire line here just stays the same. But it's going to go 1,000,000 times. Don't type in 1,000,000. You'll be here for a minute while it's printing, but you kind of get the idea. Now I've got a couple other loops that are going to use this same variable. Going down, I have a while loop. Now, I have to have the same setup. If you remember in the previous programs, I have to have a start condition, an end condition, and a counter. This is my start condition right here, or starting variable. This is the ending condition. And this is the counter increment. It increments the count so it goes up. Now, whatever I typed in before, 5, 10, is going to be here as well. While count is less than 5, or 10, or 1,000,000, this thing's going to loop. Now, if I don't have this in here, if I just erase it, I'm going to have an infinite loop. And the reason for that is every time this thing loops, well, count is 0, print. Count is still 0, print. Count is still 0. Count's not changing. It's always less than whatever I type in because it's not going up. So I have to have this one little line here to make sure that doesn't happen. Infinite loops are very common. Everybody who's programming will run into them eventually, either by mistake or just accident. Sometimes it can be done on purpose, depending on what you're doing. So whatever I type in, this will go that many times too. And I could, add plus count at the end, and I could display that variable too if I wanted to. Now the last one is a do while. To kind of follow what we were doing before. Now I have int count is 0. And I have int counter is 0 here. Now, one thing I want to point out, notice that I have I here, right? And if I say int I equals 0, my program is perfectly fine. And the reason that is because of something called scope. I, when it's declared here in these parentheses, it only exists here. Once I get to the brace, I doesn't exist anymore. The way Java, kind of conserves memory space, is it declares the variables, and when we're done with them, throws them away. So now I could use that I again and make another for loop if I wanted to, because I is kind of enclosed in this little looped system here. Now this is different. I'm declaring it out kind of in the open. So if I come down here below that and I say int count equals 0, I'm going to get an error. It's going to tell me variable count's already defined. You can only define a variable once until it's gone away. Now this variable is going to be defined until I get to a closing brace that matches it. So in this case, this is in the main. That's the start here. This is going to exist until I get to the end of the main. Now I could, instead of typing int, say count equals 0. And that will change the variable to 0. That's perfectly acceptable. Int count isn't, because it's already defined once. You only have to have the int portion or double or string or whatever you're defining it with once. After that, I can do this as much as I want. Like that. Now here, int counter, remember the difference between a do while and a while is simply that the do while will always run one time. Even if counter is 97, this will still run, one time. Or number is 0. Everything else will fail, and this will run once, regardless. Now, same setup as the while loop. The only difference is you have this do in front of it, and the while's at the end. Different structure, and there's the one minor difference in that it will always run once. Places where this could be useful, let's say you have a little menu for the user to pick from. They have a couple of choices. One of those choices is exit. Now you can do this until they typed in exit. That way it will always show the menu at least once. They can choose to exit afterwards if they won't. You could still do the same thing with this. It's just this will force it to, at least run the code once. Now, if I come up here and run this, we'll see how many times do I want to loop. Well, I'll loop 5 times. And I will get barbecue chicken, 0 through 4, Cajun rice, and corn, 5 times each. This is a good dinner, by the way. Now, what if I type in 0? I'm only going to get corn. Because remember what I said. We come up here and I say 0. Well, is 0 less than 0? No, it isn't. They're the same. So this for loop fails. All right, is 0 less than 0? Nope, this while loop fails. But the do while will always do this code. So, I type in 0. Well, we come down here, counter is 1. Is 1 less than 0? No, it isn't. So this only runs one time. It's going to end up failing that second time. And that's kind of roughly how that works. I can basically control all these loops with this one variable here using input. Or even just declaring a variable above it. I could say int num equals 5, and that's where that would control it. All right, that's it.